So we're at the stage of the digestive process where we start to talk about absorption. And so let's just trace where we are, do a quick recap of where we are so far. So we talked about how ingestion happens in the mouth, and there, our food starts to be chemically and mechanically broken down. And then it travels as a bolus down by peristalsis, down the esophagus, in behind here to our J-shaped stomach. And in our J-shaped stomach, we see that there's some hydrochloric acid there to kill any nasty bacteria. It's also there to create a pH environment that is acidic so that pepsin can start to be activated, and that will start to break down some of our proteins into their subunits. So that's where we are. All of that, there we have ingestion and then digestion happening in our stomach. Now what we're going to talk about, though, in this lesson is absorption. That happens primarily in our small intestine and in our large intestine. And so in grade 10, we would have talked about these very vaguely. What you're probably remembering is that we talked about how, just generally speaking, in the small intestine, that's where our nutrients are absorbed into the bloodstream, and that's true. But we're going to break that down a little bit more. And we also talked about how the large intestine is where water is absorbed, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail, so stay tuned. So at this point, by the time our food reaches, or what's left of our food reaches our small intestine, then most of them they're broken down into their components, okay? So they've been broken down to a certain extent. But the thing is that, whereas the pH of the stomach is in the low acidic range, so like 2-3 normally, the pH range all of a sudden at the start of the small intestine rises to between 6 and 8. And what that does is it turns off, it's like an off switch for pepsin. Remember, pepsin is a digestive enzyme aimed at breaking down proteins in our stomach. And that works okay in our stomach because we have the mucus producing cells lining our stomach, which protects it from, digesting itself, right? The pepsin in there, our stomach muscle walls are also protein. We don't want those to be digested by the pepsin, but the mucus is there to prevent that from happening. The problem is, in a small intestine, we don't have the same level of mucus protecting the intestine from digestion, so we need a way to turn off pepsin. And the way that happens is by suddenly there being a huge drop in, or rise in, pH once food reaches the small intestine. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So pepsin works great for digesting proteins in the stomach, but is turned off by the higher pH level in the intestine. And what that does is it turns on another enzyme called trypsin, and its job is to break down smaller polypeptides, but it's not going to be able to break down large proteins. So it's really kind of an ingenious design, really, our digestive system, in that we can use pH to act as on and off switches, because our enzymes are going to have optimal pH functioning ability based on, where they're positioned. All right, so when food leaves the stomach, so here we have this, the stomach up here. This looks like it's not too full. Then once food leaves the stomach, it's going to the small intestine, right? And so we know that, generally speaking, from grade 10, this is where we would see our nutrients being absorbed into the bloodstream, and so our intestines are surrounded by a capillary network so that can happen. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but it is divided into 3 sections. This is the new part. So the small intestine is divided into the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. So the duodenum is this first little section. It's fairly short. You can see sometimes it's called U-shaped or C-shaped. Okay, and then after that short little section, we have the jejunum, and then lastly the ileum. Okay, and the ileum is the last section, and you can see it's connecting to our large intestine. So let's talk a little bit more about each of these 3 sections. Again, the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. So there's a lot of information here for us to absorb. I would like for us to look at these diagrams first. So what you're seeing here is a cross section of the small intestine, and you'll see that you can see different muscle layers. You're not really responsible for knowing those muscle layers at this stage of things, but what I do want you to notice is that you have these little hills or bumps, and they're called villi. And so the villi, if we zoom in on it, that's what we have here. So you have a singular villus, multiple villi. It almost looks like a shag carpet of sorts. But what those aim to do is to create a much larger surface area for nutrient absorption. If we spread all of these villi out flat, that would vastly increase the surface area for absorption. But by having these multiple folds, we're able to kind of have the same surface area but in a smaller sort of space or volume. So notice when we look in, we can see that there is both a vein and artery system connected to each individual villus, and that's just again to maximize our nutrient absorption through the walls of that small intestine. And this is true, by the way, for all of the small intestine, not just the duodenum. And if we look at, here's another diagram. I really like this because it shows not only that there are villi, but also microvilli. So what is a microvilli? Well, it's like a villus on top of a villus, right? And again, that's like just to increase the surface area as much as we can possibly have. So back to the duodenum. The duodenum is shorter. It's about 25 centimeters long. So if you can picture 25 centimeters, that's shorter than your standard ruler, which is, I want to say, about 30 centimeters. It's U-shaped, as I talked about before, but it has these villi that I talked about, along with the microvilli, all connected to that sort of capillary network to help for nutrient absorption. So let's write a little bit of that down. So you might want to pause the video to write down the next couple of talking points, which we've already sort of talked about. The last one that I want to talk about, though, that I didn't mention and I ought to have, was that as food is going to move into the duodenum, remember that it's coming from, so if we can imagine, here's our J-shaped stomach kind of thing, right? And then it's going to lead into the duodenum, which is that sort of C-shaped little bit there, So here is our pyloric sphincter. So as food moves in through to the duodenum, boom, what you see as that's connected to the duodenum that you can't really see in this diagram is that this is where the bile duct comes in, and also your a duct from the pancreas. And what they do is they're responsible for injecting some digestive enzymes, some specific materials into the duodenum, and that is what is affecting or causing that change in pH that will change the environment within the duodenum or the small intestine relative to the stomach. So the duodenum is where we see some secretions from our gallbladder in the form of bile, and also from the pancreas in the form of insulin and some other materials that we're going to get into a little bit later, and mostly in grade 12 actually. So that's why you will often find that the bile duct, if you kind of trace it back, you can locate either the liver or the gallbladder or the duodenum. That is, of course, when you're doing a dissection. So following this video, the next lesson is going to involve you looking at these accessory organs. They're not part of the alimentary canal or the digestive tract per se, but they are involved. So you're going to look a little bit more deeply at the gallbladder and at the pancreas and how they come into play. But where they come into play is just in the duodenum. So I've got another picture here just to remind us of where we are, so we can keep track of things. So here's our duodenum. That's where we're going to see our bile duct. And secreting bile into our duodenum. Now we're ready to talk about the next section, which is the jejunum. So the jejunum is, quite a bit longer than the duodenum. It's, about 2.5 meters long. So I want you to just pause for a minute and think about that. 2.5 meters. So 2.5 meter sticks long, all squashed into your abdominal area. So it makes up, it comprises about 40% of the small intestine. Now, food's moving along here. It's got a little bit of bile mixed in. It's got some pancreatic and enzymes mixed in there, and it's moving on to the from the duodenum, and it's going to have more folds than the duodenum, and that's just again to maximize absorption. But we know that at this point most of our food is broken down, but there's still a little bit of breaking down that needs to happen before some of our larger pieces can get absorbed. You'll remember carbs we're starting to break down in our mouth by using amylase, right? That's that chemical digestion of amylase, or using amylase of our larger carbohydrates and some disaccharides. Protein are going to start to get digested by using pepsin in the stomach. But, there still may be some pieces that need to be further broken down. And so that's going to happen in our small intestine, in the jejunum. So that process is just going to carry on. Okay, so lastly, I want to talk about the ileum. That's the final piece of our small intestine, and that's 3 meters long, so even longer than our jejunum. Now, the math here is a little wonky. This is when we say about, we mean, when I say 60% and 40%, I mean like about. It's just to give you a sense of it, of the relative size. So in the ileum, you're going to see fewer villi and microvilli, and that's because a lot of the digestion is already sort of, and absorption has already happened in the jejunum. But we're going to see a little bit more of it. But the role of the ileum is also, of course, to act as the gateway to the large intestine, which we can see here. It's leading to our large intestine. Okay, so I've included a picture here that shows the large intestine with the small intestine just removed, just for reference sake. And so, what we would see here, remember, if our small intestine were there, we just left off with our ileum connecting to our small intestine, or our large intestine. And so that would happen kind of in behind here. And so this is the pathway that food would actually be moving. It would be entering in this portion of the colon, which is, the colon is another name given to the large intestine. So the ascending colon, ascending means going up. So food enters the colon and rises up the ascending colon, moves through the transverse portion of the colon, and then down the descending colon. Here's our sigmoid colon. Okay, so sigmoid is a word that means sort of like S-shaped or curved. So there we see our food would be moving into the sigmoid region, and then rectum. The rectum is just a storage place for our fecal matter, our waste, and then our anus is a sphincter that controls the movement of materials out of the rectum. So now we've got some time to write a few things down. The function of the colon or the large intestine is primarily the absorption of water, right? So the large intestine contains E. coli. Now, people will say, well, isn't E. coli bad? Well, E. coli has various strains, and some of them are helpful to humans and some of them are hurtful. So the type of E. coli, think of it sort of like dogs, right, and breeds. So they're E. coli is like a general name, that's like saying dog, but then there are different strains of E. coli, and that's like saying the specific breed. So E. coli, we have these nice healthy E. coli bacteria that live in our large intestine, and so their job is primarily to take some of our waste and use it to turn it into wonderful vitamins B and vitamin K. Sometimes when you catch some kind of a virus or a bug of some sort, or even if you take antibiotics, what that will do, the antibiotics will disrupt these nice, wonderful bacteria living in your colon, and you might get diarrhea as a result. Because remember, the function of the large intestine is that's where water is absorbed and back into your circulatory system. So those bacteria are really important for that reason. And a solution to that is to take probiotics, which will help to replenish some of the wonderful flora in your intestines. So people will often ask me in class, why is your fecal matter brown? So it's brown because of this material called bilirubin. And so bilirubin is a byproduct once our body breaks down hemoglobin. And where's hemoglobin? Well, that is the oxygen-carrying molecule found on our red blood cells. So that is what the brown fecal matter color is coming from. And so, your fecal matter also, depending on its color, and I'm going to maybe encourage you to look this up, depending on its color can tell you a little bit potentially about some ailments that you might have. Another thing is, another question students will ask me is, why is fecal matter awful smelling? Why does it smell bad? And that's typically because of those healthy bacteria living in our intestines that are producing those nasty smelling gases as a byproduct. One thing I forgot to mention when talking about the large intestine is the appendix. So notice the appendix is located really close to the division between the ileum and the ascending colon, right? So if you have had your appendix removed, that is actually where you might see a small little laparoscopic incision. All right, so now students will often ask me how much time is required for all of this food to pass through our system. So your textbook breaks this down really nicely for us. So I've made a copy of the table and we'll just kind of go through it. So mouth. So mechanical and chemical digestion takes between 5 and 30 seconds. Now, I think specialists will tell you that it's better to chew your food thoroughly before you swallow it, before you take that bolus down, because it can prevent choking. It's also just healthy because it slows down the whole process and allows your stomach to have the time to register fullness, right? So if you eat really quickly, you might eat more than you need to feel full. So 5 to 30 seconds. The whole process of chewing your food is called mastication. Can't remember if we talked about that last year or not, but that process, that stage where food is in your mouth, actively being broken down mechanically and chemically, is about 5 to 30 seconds, depending on how much you're chewing. Now, the whole swallowing bit, the movement of that bolus down from your mouth to your stomach, takes about 10 seconds. And if you don't chew well enough, then you can actually feel it moving down your esophagus, and it's sort of an uncomfortable feeling, I think. So there's that. Now, how long does food stay in your stomach? Well, it really depends. It depends how much it needs to be broken down, but you can usually feel the churning in your stomach by those, the 3 layers of muscle that are in your stomach. And so in your stomach, you're going to see the churning, which is your mechanical digestion, and also the chemical digestion by means of pepsin and some hydrochloric acid. So that's going to be, between 2 and 24 hours, depending on the food it is. Your small intestine, once your food moves into your small intestine, then just that mechanical and chemical digestion, meaning, absorption of nutrients, is going to be about 3 to 4 hours. And then finally, the water absorption, depending, everybody has a different metabolism. Some people have a bowel movement daily or multiple times daily. Some people have a bowel movement maybe once a week, right? So really depends. Typically though, it will say, 18 hours to 2 days for water to be absorbed. But of course, you can always increase the rate of materials moving through your intestine by increasing your fiber intake, as an idea. So there it is. There's your breakdown of absorption with some details on how long your food components are lasting in each section of the digestive system. So in the class note, you will find a link to a video on digestion, which is a good overview of the whole process. So I would encourage you, if you have the time, to take a look at that. And as always, reach out with any questions that you have.